For some strange, unknown reason, disgraced Republican congressman and pathologically lying fraud, George Santos, agreed to discuss President Biden's impeachment inquiry as well as his own many ethics scandals on CNN. And it did not go well. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, we have many clips to play. I don't want to spend too much time on this except to remind you that George Santos is a freshman Republican congressman from New York, and he is basically the poster boy for the GOP's moral decay, with the possible exception of its leader, Donald Trump. He is an utter disgrace. He's under investigation by multiple agencies, multiple branches of government, including the Department of Justice, as well as the House of Representatives' own Ethics Committee. Now, he issued a statement in response to Kevin McCarthy's announcement that President Biden would be the target of an impeachment inquiry. George Santos essentially says, look, I don't support a full impeachment at this time, but I do believe that the allegations and evidence are compelling enough that I do support an impeachment inquiry into the president. Now, before I jump into his commentary about President Biden's impeachment inquiry, I do want to play a specific clip from the interview in which CNN's Erin Burnett asks Santos point blank, hey, if the House Ethics Committee finds that you're guilty of wrongdoing, will you resign?
Sure. Would you resign if the committee concludes that you committed wrongdoing?
Look, I think that the committee should be very wary about making any hasty decision. That's been my entire case in point with everything going on. The DOJ has their case. I think that it would be very responsible for the committee to have one conclusion and then something else play out in court. So my answer to your question, no.
All right, very blunt. He will not resign even if his own House Ethics Committee finds him guilty of wrongdoing. And even though 80% of his own constituents, including 70% of his Republican constituents, want him to resign, he won't do it. Kevin McCarthy won't expel him because Kevin McCarthy needs as many votes as possible. So they're stuck with George Santos, and George Santos knows it. Now, with respect to the commentary that he has on President Biden's impeachment inquiry, context for this clip is Erin Burnett has pointed out, like, listen, there are members of your own party, of your own conference, of your own caucus, members of the Freedom Caucus, the far-right Trump-supporting Freedom Caucus, who not only say that there's no evidence to support impeachment, they don't seem to even support an impeachment inquiry, but you do. So how do you square these things?
So what do you say to him?
Well, I agree with him. Right now, we don't have sufficient proof to impeach him, but we have sufficient evidence and sufficient leads to go do an inquiry, and that's exactly what we're doing. I think what you're confusing the American people with the point you're trying to convey is that we don't have sufficient avenues to go investigate and look into the president, which clearly, as clear as day, is we have sufficient avenues to go down and see what Hunter did, when Hunter did it, what the president knew, what did he do when he knew. Nobody can explain how Hunter Biden, with no experience, ends up on the board of Burisma at the time that his father is vice president of the United States. Those are all valid questions the American people deserve answers to.
Now, this is probably going to be a day of like all impeachment videos because it has actually superseded, Donald Trump's many criminal indictments, the, prevailing question of whether or not the Constitution disqualifies him. This is like the immediate political meta of the moment. There's so much to unpack, but it's pretty easy to explain how Hunter Biden, an attorney, somebody who has grown up around Washington, D.C. with numerous connections, got his job with Burisma. Nepotism, right? He cashed in on his father's name. I think most people would agree that he did. The question is whether or not Joe Biden was aiding and abetting that. That's the question. Hunter Biden, exploiting his father's name to his own personal benefit is not an impeachable offense for his father. That's what Republicans don't seem to grasp. Furthermore, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have been under investigation by the House of Representatives for 9 months. So why don't you have answers to these questions now? You are putting the cart before the horse. You are seeking this impeachment inquiry without sufficient basis because the past 9 months have yielded nothing credible against President Biden. Now, the last clip I want to play, this is the funniest one. CNN put together a great gotcha compilation of George Santos's many lies, and they probably had to filter it out because this is only a minute and a half, so this is basically a snippet of his greatest hits. And they throw it to his face. They play this to his face and ask him for comment. So brace yourselves for maximum cringe, maximum schadenfreude.
My grandparents survived the Holocaust.
My mom was a 9/11 survivor.
They sent me to a good prep school, which was Horseman Prep,
in the Bronx?
I actually went to school on a volleyball scholarship. When I was in Baruch, we were the #1 volleyball.
Did you graduate?
But I put myself through college and got an MBA from NYU.
So, Congressman, I just want to give you a chance here. You've admitted, I understand you didn't graduate from NYU. Horace Mann says they've searched the records. There's no evidence that George Santos or any alias attended Horace Mann. Can you explain to anybody watching that why you said some of the things that you've said, which you yourself have admitted are not true?
Erin, you know what would be great? And I'm not deflecting, but I'm just going to call you out here in CNN. Have you brought Joe Biden on the network and spoken about all the things he said across the last 46 years? Because I haven't seen it. Joe Biden was top of his graduating
Congressman
class.
Santos, this interview is between you and me, and it is
I
about
understand,
you.
I understand, but we started off on impeachment. That was a preface of this interview. So I'm really going to go back. Are you bringing Joe Biden on? So when you bring Joe Biden on,
it's
when you bring
completely
Senator
irrelevant to the
Blumenthal,
conversation. And to be very clear, you and I spoke this afternoon, and I said we would begin with impeachment and talk about many other things about you. You were well aware of that, so it would be unfair to claim anything otherwise.
I'll continue to say, when CNN starts pressing Blumenthal, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden, I'll continue to talk to you guys. But for now, no, I'm not answering these questions to you. I've done them extensively throughout many interviews, and people can see it elsewhere.
All right.
So he says, I'm not going to deflect, and then proceeds to deflect for a minute. He's clearly outraged. It's a whataboutism about President Biden. And then he claims that basically Erin Burnett and CNN sandbagged him with an irrelevant talking point. And she said, actually, no, when you and I spoke this afternoon, I told you we were going to ask you to weigh in on impeachment as well as many other things about you. So that was profoundly humiliating. George Santos continues to be a carbuncle on the Republican Party, one of many. He's perhaps the most, pestilent, right, with the exception potentially of Donald Trump. But this is where the GOP is going. This is the pedigree of the modern-day Republican politician. There is no counterweight to this in the Democratic Party. This is a uniquely Republican issue. And as long as they continue to put power over principle, it will remain that way.